Thank you so much, Doctor, for the wonderful presentation. I really learned a lot, especially from the statistics. Thank you, Mr. Hussein, for having me to be part of the uh, discussion speakers for today. Looking at the world today, Doctor Doctor has already made justice to a whole lot of global challenges around the environment and sustainability. So I would just add a little and then relate it to some of the little works we are doing here, grassroots in Nigeria. So climate change is really a global challenge that doesn't just affect the developing nations, but also affecting global developed nations, but in various uh, capacities, in various impact, as well as at various timelines. And when you look at Africa, for example, today, some of the most devastating impacts of climate change are evident from the northern parts of Africa, closer to the Sahelian regions. You have a lot of environmental degradation, desert encroachment around the Chad, northern parts of Niger, amongst others. Then, when you go down towards, take for example, Nigeria, the coastal areas of Nigeria around the Lagos, Port Harcourt, and other coastal regions around Africa, you find out that there are huge amounts of sea level rise from the developed or from the coastal areas coming down to increase sea level rises around this location. This is really threatening, affecting global development, affecting economy, affecting livelihood. So I would just flow and make relation to what Doctor has already put down on ground. So climate change is really linked to a lot of factors, causes as well as consequences. And some of the most devastating causes are the emissions or causes of emissions of greenhouse gases from the industrial areas. Before now, when we didn't have much industries, there was really lesser amount of emissions. But currently, the rate of emissions from industrializations, from transportation, from urbanization, it is significant, and this is really devastating. In Africa, for example, Africa emits less than 4% of the total greenhouse gas emission, but nonetheless, Africa is significantly being affected. That's because the issue of global change doesn't just go to affect those who emit most. It affects everyone. That is why it's a global issue that requires a global partnership, just like Dr. Ahmed said, to be able to address these menace. And then going down to some of these thematic sectors that contribute to climate change. Doctor has already talked about some of these devastating impacts. He talked about air pollution. He talked about, oh yes, but then what are these causes from the grassroots, from individuals, from communities? You find out that yes, due to lack of technology in clean cooking services, lack of renewable sources of energy, communities tend to leverage on deforestation for sourcing fuels for cooking. Communities tend to cut down trees to create farmlands to enable them, farm their produce, to enable them feed and sell. So some of these issues, our communities today continue to cut down trees in respect to development, urban growth, buildings. And with the increasing population, today we have a population of about 8 billion, which this population is expected to continue to escalate in the nearest decades to come. So, waste, for example, in Nigeria, waste contributes to about 8% of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from Nigeria. Waste, with the increasing population, you have an enormous amount of waste being generated from households, from industries, and this releases methane. This is one of the greenhouse gases that contributes enormously to some of this climate change impact. Like I have made mention, there are a lot of nexuses between climate change and development. There are a lot of nexuses between climate change and human health. There are a lot of nexuses between climate change and economies. Recently, the COP27 that just concluded in Egypt, where you had a lot of demand, especially from the African continent, around addressing loss and damage. And successfully, oh yeah, there was a very good progress as to regards to loss and damage funds. And the purpose of this loss and damage funds is to help build and support some of these communities that are most affected by the impacts of climate change, who don't even know about how they contribute or contribute less insignificant amounts of emissions to some of these issues, but they are being affected by, the major developed countries who emit most amounts of this emission. So what are some of those things that are going to be addressed as regards to loss and damage funds? You have issues of flooding in Nigeria. 20 this year, you had over 25 states that were affected massively by flooding, communities destroyed, livelihoods destroyed, biodiversity greatly at the verge of extinction, um, poverty rate escalating, migration at the rise because people have to move from places of vulnerability to places of shelter, places that they could really have some resilience, that they are being safe from some of these climate catastrophes. Oh yeah, what next? Plastic production or plastic pollution. This is plastic pollution today. Plastics are a way of life globally, and the amount of plastic pollution produced is really, really on the increase. Really, really on the increase. Before the in the 1950s, you had only about an average of about 2 million plastics being produced, but currently, sorry, in 2015, you had about 14.9 million uh, tons of plastic being produced. And devastatingly or threateningly, some of these plastics end up in the oceans. They end up in the oceans, causing great threat to aquatic species, causing great threat to wildlife animals. Because through the process of ingestion or entanglement, some of these aquatic species get to ingest some of these plastics that do not decay for over a period of 400 years, either breaking down into microplastics and causing devastating harm um, to ocean aquatic animals, or even to human beings. Chemicals such as phthalates, bisphenol A, all pose great threats, human health threats to even humanity, not just aquatic species. So some of these pollution are really also very big, significant environmental problems that are affecting the world today. And that is because we, especially we in the developing countries, we do not have effective waste management systems. We do not have sustainable circular systems to enable us manage end to end some of these plastics being produced. Plastics, immediately they are being produced, especially single use plastics, they end up um, in on the gutters, landfills, uh, open dump sites, and this is really, really threatening. Like I made mention of how it affects biodiversity, and especially also, I will give you another example of open burning, which also contributes, just like Dr. gave statistics of some of the open burning statistics around the world. Nigeria was ranked around the fourth. Now, you find out that, especially in Nigerian abattoirs, that is places where meat are being processed, tires, used tires or waste tires are being used as burning sources of burning fuels for burning of this meat in this abattoir. This is really, really um, threatening, because when you go to some of these abattoirs, even the air, the microclimate alone is not humanly conducive. It becomes so dark, it chokes, it causes air pollution, it affects human health. I wonder how these people survive, and I'm very definitely certain that when research are being carried out, there will be lesser amounts of life expectancy by some of these practitioners or people, residents of some of these communities. Now, in earlier 2022, we carried out a an engagement activity in the Niger Delta part of Nigeria, which is an oil producing region. And it was really devastating to see some of the impact of oil spill on these communities, impact of oil spill on their livelihoods. They can no longer farm. because their soils are highly contaminated, their waters are highly contaminated, and some of these things have been linked by virtue of testimony, by virtue of research, to increasing the amount of miscarriages amongst residents of these communities, lesser life expectancy by residents of these communities, loss of livelihoods, increased poverty by residents of this community. And this is really alarming. This is just an example of some environmental pollution or environmental problems that are really, even to our eyes, we could see some of their impact affecting humanity. And with increasing human activities, indiscriminate human activities, these situations are likely to worsen. The world that we are after, a sustainable environment, might not be achieved if there is no really an urgent, immediate action that brings about partnership for sustainable development. I'm happy that Doctor gave us a very elaborate statistics on global environmental problems as well as their facts. I would just, I'm trying to focus on scenarios from what I have experienced and what I have encountered to add up to what Doctor has said. So, going forward, like Doctor made mention, issues of air pollution, and he gave the statistics about 4.2 to 7 million people died annually due to air pollution. And when you link some of these air pollution problems, not just waste, but just like the issue of open burning of tires I made mention for high processing, when you look at also issues of firewood burning, when you go to communities today, especially in developing countries who do not have clean cooking technologies, these communities tend to depend on deforested trees. That is, cut down trees, for a source of fuels, and this has consequences on their health as a result of air pollution being being generated from this cooking. That is why we have advocates, advocating for clean cooking technologies, sustainable solutions that will bring about a climate smart environment, reduced pollution, and foster sustainable development. Now, going forward, what can we do as individuals, as corporations, as private sector, to be able to address some of these problems, because the solution is really the way forward. And that is why, while Mr. Hussein was reading my biography, he spoke about my organization trying to provide sustainable solutions to address some of these problems. We believe that the problems are there, and if we don't focus on looking at innovative solutions to address this problem at from the grassroots, while we focus on also replicating these solutions at the global level, then we might just be making noise and really no actions. So going to actions, I want to talk about how can we individually contribute? How can we contribute as a group? Now, as individuals, how are you contributing your carbon footprint? Because that is the first stage. How are you really part of the problem, or are you part of the solution? So if you are part of the problem, which most of us are in one way or the other, we make use of vehicles, we create pollution in our houses, we generate waste. These are things that are, are a common day activity. We see them as a way of life. But then how can we minimize, how can we mitigate, and how can we contribute to creating solutions? So you could begin to contribute by lending your voice for policies. You could begin to contribute by advocating for sustainable change. You could begin to practice ways that could reduce your plastic footprint, ways that could reduce your carbon footprint. Going forward, as organizations, as change makers, how can we collectively, in a partnership format, address some of these global change? One of the best approach I always recommend is the angle of social entrepreneurship, an angle that addresses social problems, either social or environmental problems, while also creating social benefits. That is, while you address some of these problems, you create economic values, you create social change, and you promote sustainable development. As such, why I'm talking about social enterprises, for the problem of waste today, we have a lot of ongoing research, groundworks projects, innovations around waste, waste to wealth, waste to energy, waste to resources. These are ways to utilize some of this pollution and transform them into solutions that will create not just green jobs, not just profit, but also create a sustainable environment. Now, we are talking about the plastics we generate. The plastic we generate, the value of plastic recycling or waste recycling globally is about $55.1 billion. That is to show you that there is enormous amount of economic value in some of these problems. These are problems that could be tapped and transformed into opportunities, opportunities that would yield much, much more social values. And in 2020, in 2028, it's expected that these values are expected to grow to about $90 billion. That is for waste recycling alone. That's to show you that for the communities who depend on agriculture, on cutting down of trees to as their source of energy for cooking, there are ways that agricultural waste are being transformed into biochars, biocharcoal that can serve as clean cooking energies for these communities who do not have any form of big technology to cook. This is applicable in especially developing and rural communities. There are some projects we have done in Nigeria around training women on the production of charcoal briquettes from agricultural waste. That is to say, the waste that could have been decayed and create methane, which could contribute to climate change, can actually be utilized to generate energy to support cooking. In turn, reducing air pollution that could affect the health of these communities and also creating social and enterprise values along this value chain. Also, around biogas, that is organic waste, which contribute enormously. It generates methane that contributes to climate to greenhouse gases. This can be utilized to create cooking energy also in replacement of the charcoals or in replacement of this tree cutting that reduces potentials of trees to sequestrate carbon, especially in these practices, in these locations that have been practices. Nonetheless, going forward, sustainable development can have to be achieved, but in various and multidimensional approaches. Just like Dr. Ahmed said again, partnership is key, but also we need to look at it in the aspect of utilizing this strong tool, like I made mention, social entrepreneurship to create solutions around clean energy, around biodiversity conservation, around minimizing global warming, as well as creating much more economic potentials, green jobs, and ensuring sustainable development. Without wasting much of our time, I would just talk about the biodiversity links that when some of this pollution, like I mentioned earlier, plastic pollution that end up in some of these oceans and causes significant threats to the lives of aquatic animals. Once these plastics are able to be utilized, some of these waste are utilized, then hence reducing the amount of waste. Already, we are already protecting the biodiversity, especially floras and faunas in their ecosystems and in their ecosystems, and hence reducing the amount of extinction as well as the amount of endangered species that are about to be extinct. So I would just stop here due to time and entertain any much question. I believe it's an interactive session. I'm happy to contribute my quota. Thank you so much, and Mr. Hussein, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Malana Ali Sadiq. You make a very wonderful presentation, and I believe our participants we learned a lot. We learned a lot from your analysis, and also as we all know, this climate change of a change is something that is affecting Africa, because we all come from Africa. We know how this climate impact is affecting us as human, and also affecting our environment, and also affecting our animals. And this climate change is something that we're supposed to focus on, because it's very, very worse, especially in Africa. And also, if we can use Nigeria as a case study, if we check previously, I think last year we experienced a lot of flooding in part of Nigeria. I think in Jigawa State, Benue, and also Bayelsa State, and also part of Lagos State. We experienced this flooding, which it affected a lot of people, and based on lack of awareness and lack of the knowledge of climate change. And from your analysis, I believe even me as a moderator, I really learned a lot from the analysis, and also you talk about the way forward in which we can tackle this climate change. I believe from the solution that you mentioned, or the solution that you made analyze, I believe we can start using this solution to tackle this climate issue in our various community. I believe we'll be able to overcome this climate change. And also, you made mention of the industrial emission, and as we all know, most of the industrial company that we have especially in Nigeria, are located in the urban area, which is affect most of the people that are staying in particular based on the the emission that is coming out from those companies in terms of production. And also, there in this opportunity there is in this climate change in terms of the waste recycling. If we can start recycling the waste instead of us dropping waste anyhow in our environment. For instance, when we look at our environment, you see a lot of dustbin, a lot of waste, because most people don't know how this is all about. I believe from your analysis, we can start using all these waste to get more money, and also for us to to have something doing, because it's part of the job opportunities in terms of the recycling. Thank you very much for making a justification from your analysis.